Nuestro próximo ponente es el doctor Luis Enrique López, who now is coordinator of the Guatemala Quality of Education Program. He is a noted specialist in applied sociolinguistics of indigenous languages and peoples, and his work is concentrated in the Americas. He is the author of a number of books on the ecology of language and on bilingual education in Bolivia, which is the country in which he has specialized, devoted many of his efforts. He's also author of an important book titled La Educación Intercultural Bilingüe en América Latina bajo examen, on bilingual education in general in Latin America. And he has served on numerous international working groups, including UNESCO's World Commission for the Study of World Languages. And Dr. Lopez today will be discussing with us language revitalization amongst indigenous populations in Latin America. Dr. Lopez.
Thank you very much, Louise. I'm going to speak about mainly what is happening in Latin America in general. I'm not going to be concentrating on a specific country, but working from the bottom up. That is, emphasizing on language policies that are driven by indigenous communities themselves. And I do so because during the past, for 15 years before moving last year to Guatemala, I had been accompanying indigenous university students through their professional development at postgraduate level, and I learned a lot from them on how to work with linguistic diversity. Comienzo entonces.
Very well. The slides are in English, but I will be speaking mostly in Spanish. I will cover 4 topics. I'll be sharing socio-demographic information with you, sociolinguistic data as well. I will identify some of the aspects that put languages at risk. And I'll also refer to language revitalization as rights. In the slide you see on the screen, you will notice that grosso modo, we are talking about almost 29 million indigenous peoples throughout Latin America. This gives us around 6% of the total population of Latin America, according to data from the official censuses. Now, despite this, the measures underway are flawed in many ways. There are other estimates as well from other institutions. For example, Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, ECLAC, of the UN, speaks to 35 million, World Bank, 40 million indigenous individuals, and the Fund for Indigenous Peoples, some 50 million. So we can safely say that the population ranges between 6% and 10% of the total population of Latin America. However, it is difficult with great certainty to know exactly how large the indigenous population is, because there's another factor, or factors. There's the social prestige that comes with this, and also ethnogenesis that we have seen throughout the continent. Here you have a map that shows the ethnic diversity throughout Latin America. I'm referring just to indigenous peoples in this case, and you will see the darker areas are those areas where we have countries with the greatest presence of indigenous peoples, not necessarily in population, but in indigenous peoples. That's what we have in this map. Brazil is the country with the greatest ethnic diversity, 241 indigenous peoples formally registered. Brazil is followed by countries such as Mexico. Mexico also has a great many indigenous peoples, and then the color gets lighter and lighter in the other countries. Eventually we get to countries such as El Salvador, which has just 3 different indigenous peoples, and in Uruguay, toward the lower right side of the map, we see stripes that show a country in which there are no more indigenous peoples, but in which more than 100,000 individuals are self-recognized as descendants of an indigenous people. Now, the next map, on the other hand, shows us the population numbers defining themselves as indigenous. You will see that the colors change quite a bit. We have Brazil, which had a lot more different indigenous tribes or peoples. Here we have scant indigenous population in numbers, 0.01% in fact of the population. We compare this to, say, Bolivia and Mexico, which are among the darker shaded, and they are countries that have among the highest numbers of indigenous peoples, individuals. Mexico has more than any other country, 10 million almost, and then Guatemala in second place, and Bolivia after that with 5 million each, more or less. And then in third place we have Peru, and then in fourth place we have Colombia, and then things change quickly from there. This map here refers to the amount of indigenous populations that have, as a proportion of the total national population. And now we see the 2 strongest presences are Bolivia in South America and Guatemala in Central America. Now, in both cases, the indigenous population, despite being sociologically and politically a minority, are in fact majorities population-wise, between 60 and 70% in Bolivia, and in Guatemala between 40 and 60% of the population. So, indigenous minorities, quote unquote, but national majorities in terms of the total numbers. Now, here's another graph. It shows the ethnic diversity of Latin America. However, it shows us this through the different sections of population. You will see that 164 of the 522 indigenous peoples that we have throughout the Americas have less than 500 members of those communities, and even less speakers of the indigenous languages, whereas there are 5 indigenous peoples that have more than 1 million members of those ethnicities. Quechua is the clear case, with between 10 and 12 speakers of Quechua in some countries, ranging from Colombia all the way down to Chile and Argentina in the far south, Peru in the west, and Brazil in the east. Important data that reflects the Latin American reality, and as well the African reality, as we heard earlier, has to do with the trans-border, transnational peoples. Of the 500 plus, 107 are cross-border. They live on different sides of borders, and that shows how arbitrarily the national borders have been defined. But it also shows a tremendous potential for the construction or building of a regional unity. It's easier to do that, even if it's a market reality, by way of the indigenous peoples than the European descent.